Okay, everybody. Well, today we're going to talk about the shamanic roots of yoga. If you've been following me for a while, you've heard this all before, and you're going to hear it again. So here we go. The three oldest spiritualities, okay, or spiritual paths, practices, sets of practices, since as far back as we can go, is shamanism, animism, and ancestor worship. If a spiritual path or a religion does not contain those three components, shamanism, animism, and ancestor worship together, they are not old. They don't go back far enough in time, okay? Animism, like animistic witchcraft, we're just going to use witchcraft as an example of animism, right? Animism is the idea or the concept that all things, whether they're animate or inanimate, contain a spirit, okay? Animism is about working with spirits, plant spirits, the spirits of rocks, rivers, lakes, oceans, mountains, trees, forests. In animism, there's a belief that every forest contains communities of spirits that can be communicated with. So it's a concept that all things have this kind of level of intelligence. So like let's say you're an animistic witch and you're practicing witchcraft, then you're taking plants and herbs, maybe bones or animal parts or whatever it is. And as you're putting together whatever concoction of magic that you're putting together, you're using animism and animistic witchcraft in order to animate this, what would be a thing, right? By breathing life into it, by giving it a spirit, or conjuring, calling on the spirit of the herb, or calling and conjuring on the spirit of the crystal. Okay, so animism and spiritism are very, very, very old. And then there's ancestor worship, ancestor veneration. Whether you go to Mexico, whether you go to China, whether you go to Japan, Africa, all over the world that still has traditional cultures. Okay? Not America. Fuck America. Nothing about America. There are people who come over to this country that bring their traditional cultures over, but America as a country doesn't have a traditional culture. Native American people have a traditional culture, but even Native American culture and those traditions are starting to die because there's not enough people that are willing to learn the tribal shamanic practices. It's starting to revive. People are becoming more conscious and aware of maintaining their link between themselves, their families, and the ancestors. But it's very difficult to find people that practice that traditional ancestor worship in this country, unless they are first-generation immigrants that come over here from Africa or China or Mexico or someplace like that. And ancestor worship and veneration pretty much today means that in someone's home, they will have a shrine or an altar with pictures of their dead on there, with a glass of water, a candle, a Bible, or some other holy book. And that place in their home represents a place where their dead live, their dead ancestors. So ancestor veneration is very important in old cultures. And also shamanism. So what is shamanism? Well, shamanism is the ability to go into trance, either using substances, and I know that everyone's heard of ayahuasca, magic mushrooms, marijuana, cannabis. There's all kinds of substances that have been used throughout time, from the beginning of time, that have put human beings in a state of trance and allowed them to experience what I guess we could say non-ordinary realities. So the video that I'm sharing below in this particular lesson talks about, and beautifully put by this director, content creator, about the shamanic roots of yoga. And the concept is very, very simple. A very, 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 very long time ago, the ancients of India, and we call them rishis. These were people who were shamans. They went out into nature. They communed with nature. They became one with nature. They realized the nature of what it meant to be human, and they were able to get in touch with who they really were, their essence, the essence of who they really were. And we'll talk about that more later. And they were able to have, by revelation, these amazing experiences where they were able to go into trance or meditation and then come back and relay these messages to everyone else, everyone who doesn't practice meditation and all of these things. And that becomes the foundation of what we know as yoga. Shamanism is the foundation of every religion. Moses could be considered a shaman, both a shaman, a tribal leader. You know, he went out to the wilderness. God spoke to him through the burning bush, blah, blah, blah. I mean, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, all of the biblical prophets that you have in the Hebrew scriptures, you know, they tell about these fantastic visions they have of heaven and heaven opening up and having all these miraculous visions. That's shamanism. That is shamanism. And so today, there are not a lot of shamans in the world. You know, the tradition is, like I said, it's part of a traditional indigenous kind of culture. And as globalization happens, those traditions and those cultures are dying out one by one by one. So trance mediumship, or the ability to go into trance using either drugs or through meditation, has been practiced for a long time, and people still do it today. People still communicate with spirits. People still use animistic witchcraft. There are fire ceremonies that were done in ancient times, Vedic ceremonies, where there were elaborate fire rituals, mantras, chants, ritual gesture. We're going to talk about all of these things, and it is mind-boggling how much stuff that we could talk about for the rest of our lives. It goes way beyond a 200-hour teacher training program, but it goes on forever and ever and ever and ever, and it never ends, really. But shamanism is kind of like the core component of all religions and the revelation to all self-understanding. Now, the beautiful thing about yoga and Taoism and Buddhism is that these are traditions that ask you to find out for yourself. Like, what's really, really great about these traditions, opposed to, let's say, some other tradition like, and I hope I don't offend you, Christianity, is that Christianity tells you to have faith in something. It asks you to believe in something, but it doesn't necessarily tell you, but you need to verify that for yourself. So there's this idea that if you believe in something, that's enough. That is not enough in these traditions. These traditions invite you to find out for yourself that what these people said is verifiable from your own experience. It's your own experience. So these are practices that are done by focusing the mind and by being realistic in your expectations and having a direct experience with pure consciousness, being awake, and kind of sifting through, I guess you could say, the bullshit, right? To find your true nature. And that requires you to be competent. It requires you to be able to process information in a very rational and logical way. Yoga, Vedanta, Buddhism, Taoism, these are extremely practical paths. Very, very, very practical. These people have spent thousands and thousands of years mapping the human mind, and coming up with all kinds of devices, meditation devices and techniques in order to help people awaken that part of their mind, their part of their brain. But so I guess what I'm saying is, if you want to crack your egg wide open really, really fast, you can go do ayahuasca. There's a lot of people that want to do that. I would not recommend it. I don't necessarily recommend drugs as the simple solution to waking up to reality as it really is. That can be very, very, very dangerous. And I would not recommend doing drugs. I would recommend going the route of meditation, and so that's what we're going to get into. I use cannabis, I use medical marijuana, and I'm not going to lie, using cannabis and then getting on my yoga mat and practicing yoga is incredibly therapeutic for me. It's very helpful for me, especially with if you have chronic pain and things like that. Absolutely helpful to use a little bit of marijuana before doing a yoga practice. It makes it much more enjoyable, pleasurable, helps you to become more internally focused rather than externally focused, which is the purpose of yoga. And of course, we all know that yogis sit on the side of the road and smoke the ganja nude, over there in India. And it's just accepted as that's part of the culture, that's part of the religion, that's part of the path. So we're going about it a little bit differently in this country, in a globalized world. These techniques are still performed in ceremony, but for all intent and purpose, as starting out on your journey to being a psychonaut, an explorer, okay, in the vast realm of your own mind and consciousness, we're going to start really, really simple, which is just studying, understanding key theories and concepts, and then trying, dabbling, practicing with different things to see what works for us and what does not. But Soma, which is what's going to be referred to down here in the documentary, Soma was originally a concoction that was made like ayahuasca that people would ingest. And the Soma, okay, that recipe, whatever that is what would take someone into trance, and it would take them so deep into trance that they would have these interplanetary, interdimensional, through the multiverse kinds of experiences. And so, like he says in the video, later on in time, the drug use was kind of like put over to the side when other techniques were used, more about meditation, less so much about using substances. But it is still something that people practice. And you have to walk a long mile before you know someone who actually, or meet someone who actually practices that particular ceremony with that recipe in that particular way. So anyway, we're going to talk about now the shamanic teachings, or the core of the roots of yoga, which is in shamanism. This is just an introduction. This is just to get your feet wet and a taste, because we will be coming back to shamanism in level 2, 3, 4, and 5. So there's a lot more to be said and a lot more things to be done. But just for today, I want you to watch the video, think about it, and journal about it.